I'm Amy Syed.
I'm Sean Collins.
And this is Numbers and Narratives.
If you were to summarize our conversation in a tweet or at max a 3-tweet thread, what did we talk about? What's the takeaway?
Our conversation was very much about why CXers know who your customer is and have the most insights about your customers. And then also how we're turning CXers into marketers.
Well, Jess, that's a great leeway into our sort of first question. Do you want to give the listeners an introduction to who you are, what you do, why you're traveling so much? Give us the deets.
So I am Jess Cervellon. I previously was a founding employee of Feastables by Mr. Beast. I was the VP of CX at Feastables. Long career in CX, 15 plus years, even, with that time plus and then some. And now today I am the host of The Juice with Jess, a podcast about marketing and CX, customer-centric just tactics from anywhere from acquisition to retention. And I also am the founder of an agency that I prefer to call a collective, but it's an agency that helps brands, e-commerce brands with everything from CX to marketing to even consumer research and insights. And I think those are like the main things that I'm plugging these days. But I also lead growth and advocacy for customer with a K. That is my full-time job.
So you're not busy, so that's great. So it's easy for you to fit us in. So I appreciate that.
I only had to reschedule this a few times, like an asshole.
Well, we're happy that you made it on. Appreciate it a ton.
I appreciate you guys having me.
Jess, a couple questions. You work with a ton of brands of all sorts of sizes, but I know with Feastables, with some of the folks that you're doing some of the fractional work with, they're a little bit on the smaller side. What, in your mind, do you think small brands are doing wrong when it comes to data? I know a lot of your work revolves around, showing people what data they're missing, putting the right stuff front and center. What do you think small brands are doing wrong? And how would you, if I'm a small brand looking to start, where should I start?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I was actually having this conversation yesterday with Michael Baer from Figs, because we both shared like a very long career in CX. And it was a similar question that I asked him, but I personally think like what brands are doing wrong, I think you're doing the best. Let's start there. I think you're doing the best that you absolutely can, but you have a missed opportunity when you're looking at your customer experience team as just support and thinking about it like, okay, all of my tickets are coming in and they're just doing the things, but you're thinking about it from like a reactive standpoint rather than a proactive standpoint. And the reason this has like to do with data is because your CX teams get so much information from your customers, far more than even first party data that you're collecting in like other channels, right? And what I'm finding across a lot of small brands, even big brands too, is that you're not like actually looking at the data and you're looking at the data from like a metric standpoint of like, oh, okay, cool, my average handle time or this or that, or like from metrics of like how you're reacting to tickets, but you're not looking at the data of like how to be proactive. And so what I mean by that is like what I do is I actually build a lot of like very scrappy analytics dashboards for a lot of our CX clients that span across from like, yes, the basic metrics, but also like what are the customers actually saying to help you inform that customer's journey through your website, through your product experience. So it's taking a lot of like other information that's not just from your tickets, but it's also extracting the information coming into your tickets, but also taking like Akendo reviews or JuneUp or whoever you're utilizing, and kind of like creating more of like a qualitative and a quantitative dashboard from that information to then guide you into your overall structure of your customer's experience. So, short answer, you're just not looking at the data correctly.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been a party to that where, I think every life cycle marketer, when they come in, the first thing they say is like, I'm gonna get tied in with CX, and that's how I'm gonna, know all the things I should say and what our members are saying or customers are saying. And then you quickly find out like, okay, well, if you only have qualitative data for me, there's some, like, I don't even know how significant it is. Like, someone made a ticket. Is that a common problem? Is that just a squeaky wheel? Like, I'm not going to change our journeys. I'm not going to change the copy around one person's thing. But if you can now start to show me, hey, this is a trend across thousands of users, now I have something to dig into. So how do you go from that qualitative to quantitative? Since obviously, everyone's going to phrase things differently. They're going to complain about different kind of symptoms of the same problem.
Yeah. I think that where I tell many brands to start is like tagging hierarchy. And I've seen it very robust and I've seen it very simple. And so like my suggestion, just to like make that even more tactical, is basically you figure out like, all right, I know that my customers are going to come to me for like order status, or they're going to come to me for like maybe problems that they have with their product, whether it's clothing or something edible. Like they're going to come to me with those problems. So those are your two cores of like why support is like being reached out to. But then like how do you dig even further about like maybe somebody's responding to a marketing campaign. Maybe somebody's like saying something like, oh, like I really liked this, or oh, I like this messaging didn't hit. I've like run into that a lot across brands, like not just Feastables. Like I've gotten a lot of people who give you feedback on like marketing campaigns, and I think that that's like really valuable, right? Like that's valuable to a marketer to be like to like look at what your customers are saying about a particular marketing campaign. So it's like tagging like what is the structure of like what your customers are saying. Like maybe it's like a feedback from a marketing campaign and then diving even deeper into that. And then it's like, it's also thinking through like, what are other portions of your customer's journey that they're hitting you from, right? Is it a website experience? Is it a checkout experience? Is it a post-purchase experience? Like tagging like those portions of the customer's journey will give you guidance into like where you need to look deeper into for like particular topics. And then also tagging like what that resolution was. So and I don't think it's like something as simple as like order status. All right, somebody came in from order status. They were in the post-purchase part of the journey, but like what product were they also like inquiring about gives you more further guidance. But two, like on the resolution piece of it, what did you do to resolve that? So like order status. All right, I resent the confirmation, or I gave them guidance on how to utilize their order tracking page. Like actually deep diving into each of these tagging pieces to then give you guidance into like where you need to make improvements or like what your inquiries are about. I know that's like super, super high level, and like I'm trying to keep it high level because every brand is really different, but it's really thinking about your tagging hierarchy as like not just your basic inquiries. Like how do I actually get information from the tickets that are coming out, and like breaking it down to like contact reason, to portion of the journey, to the product and resolution, and then constantly iterating. Like I have one customer or client that I did a whole V1 of their tagging, and now we're going through like an audit and doing like a V2 of that, right? Like to give them even more meaningful information. Like before we didn't even know where the tickets were coming from. And so now we've been able to pinpoint like what is the main channels that we're getting all these tickets from. And then like going deep diving into like the tagging of like what is actually coming into that channel. So like for instance, like a social ticket, right? Could be a comment, but it also could be somebody's inquiring about an influencer campaign, right? Or so, you know what I mean? Like it's like there's so many different touch points that like you need to just get really deep into the tagging of that. And it could be so simple as like whether you're utilizing Gorgeous, Customer, Zendesk, any of these tools, like all of these tools have like some sort of ability to tag your conversation. Now the
That's
analytics being good, that's a whole other thing.
That's really interesting. I mean, you talked about social as a support channel. Is that something that you kind of stress across the brands you work with, of like, you need to be not just in your DMs but on the comments and all that too?
Yeah, so that's actually something that I've like learned from Feastables, and like granted, like Feastables is far different than like a non-creator brand, but as you see like the world evolving, there's more and more influencers, there's more and more affiliates, creators, like all these pieces, right? And one of the brands, I actually can't mention the name of this one, but one of the brands that I work with is a creator brand, and that was like the first thing, right? They were like, okay, well, we're looking at like marketing and social media as, and like those are the people that are dealing with community, and like they're good, they've got what they need to do. But I'm like, yeah, but what do they do when you have a support ticket? They're like, oh, well, then we pass it off to the support team. But then I'm like, yeah, but then you're channel switching them and you're making them email or call or do something else, right? Like I stress like combining CX and community, and having that like either you're collaborating very closely or it's one team. I think social media and like the overall of like social media management is one thing, but the community management is a whole other aspect. People, and the other piece that I cannot stress enough is whether people are coming to you in comments, DMs, and they're coming to those social channels and they're directly coming to you. That's great because they're reaching out to you, like you're being reactive to their conversations, like, or whether it's engagement or they have a problem, right? But then what happens with everybody else that maybe just even mentions you, that never tagged you, never put a hashtag on it? Like how are you even tracking that? Here's a good example. I posted on Twitter, I don't know, a few weeks ago. I needed help with a Squarespace website that I was building for Open Lake Collective. And I didn't even tag Squarespace. I just said Squarespace, and Squarespace like landed in my threads because they have a social listening tool on. So that's exactly what I'm saying. Is like, you like when you look at community, it's like you have support people in the community supporting it, but also you have to think about like where's the analytics and for like any of the inquiries or the mentions that are outside of the channels that are even directly in your path. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm rambling. I
No,
can
no,
go
that
on.
makes
No,
I
that makes a ton of sense.
I'm going to do my every episode I do a plug for something great Klaviyo has done, and so this will be that plug. There's a Slack group called Email Geeks, and it's my favorite place in the world. It's my happy place, and Klaviyo has so many people, so many staff members who are just in there. I don't at all think it's by directive. I think they're just also email geeks. But so you like ask a question about Klaviyo, and suddenly they'll be like, "Hey, this is Francis, if you're listening, my boy Francis, I love this guy. He's been in, me and him have slacked for 6 years now at this point. But he'll just like pipe in and be like, hey, it's Francis from Klaviyo. And I'm like, yeah, man, I know who you are. Like, what's up? But like they do a great job of being in the community. And I think that, to your point, that's sort of one of the key places where you can turn from being a CS team to a CX team. And I think that that's where
Yeah.
it starts to be the difference, right?
Yeah. I love that you actually brought up Klaviyo. And even though you brought up like your Slack group, I think like one of the things that I really enjoy about leading CX teams, like I'm a marketer, like straight up, I started my journey in CX, but really I've become a marketer. I'm like not just an email marketer, I'm an SMS marketer, a content marketer. I jam out on like really trying to slang things to the behavior, the consumer, based off of consumer behavior, right? Because I learned that from CX. But the reason I'm actually really stoked that you brought up Klaviyo is because one of the things that's very undervalued that I do for every CX team that I lead is I fucking teach them Klaviyo and I fucking teach them Postscript or whatever their SMS tool is, right? And the reason I do that is because one, we talk about like friction, right? Like we talk about like, all right, well, if I'm in a social channel and I want the support team to help somebody that's like in the DMs, like I'm going to email them, right? Like that's a friction, right? So when I look at like SMS marketing, or if I look at like email marketing, I want to be in the same channels that we're marketing to those consumers at. And I also want to teach my CX team how to even use those tools so they can go and like troubleshoot things. So here's 2 instances of what I'm talking about. So for instance, mass emails. Yeah, a lot of these like help desk tools, you can do like a mass email, but you can't make it pretty. You can't make it on brand. It's just like a text-based email. That's boring. Like, who's gonna fucking open that? Sorry, I really am getting passionate because I'm starting
We've
to
already
curse.
identified that we're going to put a language disclaimer on this one. So you just go, Jess.
Okay. And when it's not my podcast, it's just like the F bombs even come out even further. Okay. So anyway, so like, but text-based emails, like, I don't know. I know I get a lot of slack for this. Text-based emails sometimes do like they don't like, you have a better like deliverability rate. Yeah, I get that. But like at the core of who I am, like I went to art school, I'm a designer, like I love designing things, right? So anyway, my point is of teaching CX Klaviyo, and like the example I was going to give, I had to send out for one of my clients, I had to send out an email about like about a product being oversold. And the agents were so used to sending mass emails through their help desk or individually, because you can't do a mass email. And I'm like, let me teach you how to turn a list into a CSV file and upload that to Klaviyo, make your list and make your segment in Klaviyo, tag it so you can track it, like, you know, like who's opened, who hasn't opened, where you can resend it, like all of those pieces. Let me show you how to build a template with like a header, a footer, or a text base, like just so you learn basic email. Right. And so anyway, so that's my point of like, I teach CXers like how to utilize Klaviyo, but then on the other end of it, I also at Feastables specifically, we had a very specific phone number, which was 69420 as our number. And so like, I think that it's very frictioned. This is my opinion, but I think it's very friction if like, let's say you have a subscription program and you're sending a text from like a different number that's not even like your regular like brand number, or you get an app and like they all want to send it to those, they're all like, yeah, we have SMS capabilities, but like nobody can actually send it from your actual number. So I was like super on one like at Feastables, and like as I ran the SMS marketing pieces, and I made every tool or partner, shout out to Postscript and certainly on this one, I made them utilize 69420 to create less friction in that channel. But then in turn, I also taught all of our CX team how to like utilize Postscript, how to send mass text messages if you need to, like even in those channels, but like keeping it all in a traditional marketing channel. I don't know where I'm going with this. My point is that I think it's really valuable to not just look at your CX team as a support staff, and like the same tools that you're utilizing to send mass emails and mass campaigns to your consumer, those individuals can like learn those tools too, to then help upskill them in like learning marketing as a whole. That's where I was going. Thanks for listening.
I think that's great. I mean, so I'll say, to pat myself on the back, we've stolen 2 people from our CX team and brought them to our marketing team, because they just understand our customers so well. I'm going to be honest, they understand our product better than most of our marketing people do, because they're in it all the time. And so our community manager is a former CX person, and we've got a product marketer, former CX person. And they've both just been crushing it because they know how to speak to the pain points. They know exactly what everyone's thinking. They know where they're going to struggle. You know, when we're launching a new feature, they're like, oh, well, here's actually the 3 questions you're going to get about this feature. So I think that's super cool.
We did that at Peloton too. It was actually, we needed to onboard somebody to do logistics data science. And what we actually ended up doing was, a lot of that was going to be driven by the CX, like logistics and CX for Peloton was pretty well coupled, because, you know, they ran their own white label delivery service. And what we ended up doing was we just ended up getting somebody from the CX team, and they had a little bit of a data background. They'd like done some SQL and just kind of paid for some overnight classes for them to kind of get sped up. And we actually found that in terms of the metric that we tracked was ticket closure time. That team member actually closed tickets quite a lot faster than everyone else because they actually had the business context for what someone was asking. Yeah, I think that your CX team just has the most information about what customers actually complain about compared to everyone else. And if you're trying to be, customer focused and focus on improving that customer experience, I don't think you can actually get better.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I think like uh oh, sorry. It like reconnected. I agree with you. I think that the CX team is kind of like a breeding ground for like other departments. Like, so where I became a marketer is because I actually helped, like, I was doing product marketing when I like worked in B2B. So that's when I actually became a marketer. And then I full fledged became a marketer when I worked at Feastables because basically I was employee 4. And like, and me and our previous CMO, he was like, okay, great. We want to like start this like SMS channel, but nobody actually managed that relationship. So it was like me and Postscript, like figuring things out. And like I've like learned SMS marketing while at Feastables because I had to, right? Like I had to. It's like being scrappy. And I think when you ask me that one question about like data in particular about small brands, I also think that a missed opportunity for small brands is not even just utilizing like or utilize your CX teams to help you across other pieces of the business, whether that's supply chain, whether that's marketing or like other pieces, because those CXers know so much about your customer already that they're going to help you inform your brand strategy. That's my opinion.
No,
I mean, that's what my agency is rooted in. So there's that.
Yeah, that feedback loop, I think, I think for consumer brands, for marketing, but I think for other companies, like you guys over at, I'm sure this is the case for folks over at Built, but also tons of other companies that I've worked with that are a little bit more on the software side. That
Yeah.
feedback loop with engineering is crazy too, right? Because it's what are we prioritizing? Like we should always prioritize features that one customers actually are asking for, which is kind of hard to do. I think with recent level ups in AI and that kind of stuff, it makes it a little bit easier now. But historically, it's been pretty difficult. So going to your CX team and asking, actually, what are people complaining about? What seem to be the tickets that are coming in where people are actually asking you for troubleshooting tips? And two, how does this correlate with people people actually not using the application going forward, people not buying from us again, all that kind of stuff, like correlating it to other parts of the business, I think is also pretty important.
Yeah.
That feedback loop back to retention, back to engineering,
Yeah.
I think matters quite a bit.
Yeah, I think whether you're CPG, an apparel brand, or even a software company, that feedback loop is just so important. And it's so important, like even on the CX side, to like equip them with the ability to just tag all of these conversations. Like, and actually, like, it's not even just about the CX team tagging conversations and getting the data. It's also allowing CX at the table. Because I think a lot of times, like I know this has happened to me a lot of times, like as just in my past being a CX manager and like working my way up like into senior leadership. It like a lot of times my information was always filtered through somebody else. So then it's like I'm like sitting at the table and I'm doing the things and I'm seeing the things and like yeah, I can give you this like report, but like you're not actually allowing me to speak on that report. You're not allowing me to like be that voice. And maybe that's not every company, but like this is at least what I've experienced in my career because I've reported into biz ops, which cared about data a lot. Okay, so this is actually where I learned a lot of my data. Then I reported into like product management, which cared about data, but like it was a little bit different. I also reported into like a CRO, customer success, like all these like varieties. And then when I got away from biz ops, it was kind of actually when like people started not caring as much about data. And like I didn't have as many seats at the table until I got into senior leadership, which is like so sad in itself.
Why do you think that is? Actually, Sean, you seem like you were going to ask something. What do you think that is? Like, what do you think is special about biz ops and like operations roles there? Is it just because like they're so tied into what the customer actually wants? Kind of curious about that.
I don't think it's just tied into what the customer wants. I think it's like most biz ops or operations people that I know, at least, um, actually, I'm thinking of every single COO or biz ops person operator that I can think of, including Laura. But they just have such a structured mindset, and but it's like also an analytical mindset that like this is why these individuals are really like good at like those types of careers, right? Because like I know that every like operations person that I've ever spoken to, and I'm like, oh, here's a problem. They're like, okay, well, what's the data behind it? How many times have you seen this? Like, give me more information before it actually before it's a bigger problem, right? So I think it's a little bit of just those individuals being more analytical than the rest. Like I'm a marketer, right? I'm a marketer at heart. I'm more of a creative. So I'm like, let's float in the clouds, my dudes. Like, let's go create some things, right? Like it's very learning data was a learned skill. It wasn't something that came like traditionally to me. It was something I had to upskill myself in. I like gut
Yeah, and
feelings.
I think I've also had similar experiences at other companies and teams I've worked at, and I think the ops people are often used to the idea of like identify a cost center, get some data to understand what that cost is in real amounts, and then figure out an intervention for that, right? And that's essentially what you're saying is like, hey, we're having, I think on the consumer side or the e-com side, it's a lot of it's going to be about returns and like, okay, why are they returning this? Do they not like the product? Was there something wrong with the way we're presenting imagery? Was it sizing? Was it whatever? But they're the ones who the cost of returns sits on their P&L and is attributed to them. And so all those kind of user issues that can be solved through communication or feature development or whatever ends up being pointed at them.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like another brand that I've like done work for, like I did just an analytics project for them. We're taking like Shopify data, their help desk data, it was customer, and also loop returns, right? And the whole reason I actually had that analytics project is because they wanted to figure out the why behind the returns. They were like, oh, so like CX was telling them like, oh, okay, like we have so many of these things, right? And like, and granted, we were like tagging in all of these other places, but nobody was actually putting all three of those tools together. And so I came in for like a few hours just to like build an analytics project to show the why, right? Which then actually informed me to help with other customers to find the why in like other things. So I actually, those analytics dashboards that I was talking about, I was like, oh, let me actually put the return data in here and give you the why for these returns rather than just saying like, here's these numbers, right? Because eventually at some point, if you're seeing an influx of these numbers, you want to know the why.
So just so I clear, what you did was you sort of mixed the tagging with the return reasons. So it's, hey, here's all the reasons that folks have complained, and then if they came in and actually had a return afterward, you can actually tie the return back to like the last
Yeah.
possible customer touch point that we had. That's
Yeah.
super interesting. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen the same. I've seen folks like try to do the same thing for like
Yeah.
churn analysis. So somebody came
Yeah.
in, and if they didn't buy from you again, or if they didn't, you
Yeah.
know, log onto the platform again afterward, like if there's a CX ticket attached to it, like what is the actual reason for that?
Right, exactly. And I think what a bit of a problem is we get so like software fatigued. Every software is going to solve a problem for something, but then none of those softwares like actually talk to each other, right? So then you got to get like an analyst to come in to like do the things, or you get AI and you plug in some APIs and like you figure it out, right? Like, but I just think that it's like all of these tools solve for all these things, but it's very individual that they solve for, and it's not showing the overall picture, you know? And it's like, so at some point, like, and I don't mean that in like a negative way. I think like all of these like have a reason and like there's a purpose for them, but like at some point you have to analyze like why maybe there's churn or why there's like an influx, and like you have to like make them all talk to each other. And like not everybody can afford the huge like BI tools, you know? So it's like you gotta like figure out like what's the scrappy ways. And I actually think that AI has helped us a lot. Like, listen, my dudes, I might sound like I'm a data analyst, but I'm gonna be honest with you. There is a lot of training that has come from OpenAI on how to do half of these inquiries, or not inquiries, sorry, queries on Google Sheets. Ibby knows. Ibby has seen my sheets before.
Hey, they're great. Hey, so it works. Yeah, we had Rachel Smith on. I think that was the episode that was posted this week. She came on a couple weeks ago, but that's I think the difference between bigger and smaller brands. The thing that I've seen is, I mean, obviously like CPG is a tough space to operate in. Like you operate on kind of slim margins, and so spending upwards of $500,000 a year on a data engineer and a data scientist and all of the actual software that goes into pulling all this stuff into places like Snowflake or BigQuery is really hard. You have to do it manually just because the margins just aren't there to be able to have talent like that in house. There's a couple companies that are doing something like this that are, there's a couple companies that are doing work in the space that's interesting. But yeah, it is very siloed. It is very manual. It's hard to do. So honestly, like more power to you. That's awesome.
How would this work as a workflow for anyone listening right now? And you can tell me I'm wrong and this won't work. But either Klaviyo or Zapier, whenever a return comes in, it triggers either a zap or a campaign that plain text coming from a CX person says like, hey, we saw your return. Can you tell us more about why you're returning this item and what we can do to make this better? Another zap takes their response and puts it in a Google Sheet. And then every month you upload that sheet's responses into ChatGPT and have it analyze the reasons and group them for you. Is that a functional workflow that a team can put into place today to start figuring out how to put qual to quant?
I think so. I think it's like you can utilize like Zapier connections for sure. And I like that idea. I think it's really funny because I was actually talking to my director of CX ops for Open Late literally this morning, and she was like, "I want to teach myself Zapier," and I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "I'm gonna go and just make a connection for Slack," and I was like, you go ahead, girl. I love that for you. Please do that, right? But like my point of bringing up that story is that like Zapier is actually a really underrated tool, but it can cost. You got to be conscious about cost though, because the amount of calls that it makes to these API connections will cost you in the long run. Like Feastables, for instance, I had like a Zapier connection. I forget what it was for, but like it was some sort of connection, and like my bill was a lot of money that I eventually was like, okay, I need to go build it. But it did help me in connecting tools, right? So like that's the point, is like underrated tool, like super can like help you connect tools. And two, I think it can also point out where you might need to like invest in some sort of like engineering and dev work to make something even stronger, right?
I love that. Yeah, just take your Zapier bill to your COO or head of people and say, this is how much it's costing now. Give me a contractor or give me an engineer or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done some crazy things with Zapier though. Now that I'm like thinking back into it, I was like, I like built some really crazy dashboards and like even like Google Studio. I've like built some things off of that too to get analytics. You really just, where there's a will, there's a way, man. Like that's basically it.
I think if you're a marketer at a non-enterprise company and Zapier's not your best friend, you aren't moving fast enough. Like,
yeah,
engineer, you're gonna have to make a ticket and wait on engineers. Just do it with Zapier first,
dude. The Jira loop. Anyway.
Well, last thing, you said a cool thing before we started. You said my life goal is to make CXers marketers. Can you tell us what that means and why?
Yeah. And I mean, maybe it's not just marketers, but like I just really think that CXers are rooted. If you're really passionate about CX, you're most likely really passionate about like being empathetic, but also just the consumer behavior of customers. Like you understand the consumer behavior a little bit more, and you've like lived in those insights for some time. And I think a really good career path for CXers is to eventually go into retention, life cycle, product marketing, like any of these like different areas of marketing, even brand marketing, right? Because if you're passionate about CX, you're going to be passionate. You're passionate about like the consumer. You're passionate about understanding that consumer. And I think that there's like CX is just like kind of like the last, not the last path, sorry, the breeding ground to like other roles that directly play into consumer behavior. So my goal for me and just like the people that work with me is to turn them into marketers because I think they can do some really cool shit.
I love that. That is the picture. That is the snapshot moment, I think. Jess, thank you so much for coming. I think this is a good place to end. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome. Before we jump off, please plug Open Late and The Juice. The Juice is a great podcast. Everyone go find it on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, The Juice with Jess.
Yeah. So The Juice with Jess is a podcast about just anything customer centric in e-commerce, everything from like acquisition to retention. We interview a lot of marketing leaders and CX leaders. It's really fun. And I've traveled around the country to record a lot of these. So a lot of hard work into the quality of it. And then, like Ibby said, and like I said at the beginning, I'm also the founder of Open Lake Collective, which is a new agency that is helping e-commerce brands with CX, marketing, as well as consumer research and brand insights. Everything that we do is rooted in data and the insights of the consumer. So we're not just operating off gut feelings. We're coming in and like researching why your customers want to buy from you and helping you with that overall brand strategy and delivering that in 3 different areas. So hit a girl up.
And that's it. Thanks so much, Jess.
Thank you so much. Okay, Ibby, can we go like build things now?
Okay, that's the actual end. I'm gonna hit stop.